I once sat at a kitchen table with a farm family where the son had been farming with his dad for nearly 20 years. 20 years of planting crops, fixing equipment, and making decisions together. And during our meeting, the son said something that caught everyone off guard at the kitchen table. He said, "I don't even know if Dad wants me here long term." The room got quiet and everyone dropped their heads. His dad looked at him and said, "What do you mean? Of course I do." And the son replied to his dad saying, "Yeah, but you've never said that." 20 years of them working side by side, and they had never talked about the future of the farm. That's what I call a kitchen table problem. And today we're going to talk about why farm families avoid the succession conversation and how to finally start it.
Welcome to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast, where we help farmers, ranchers, and business owners create a seamless transition plan for the future. From retirement to ownership transfer, we protect what you've built and guide you every step of the way.
Welcome back to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast. I'm Heidi Olson. And if you're listening today, there's a good chance you're somewhere between the shop, the pickup, and the kitchen table. Well, because it's March. In March, we seem to be celebrating a few things as ag producers, the filing of our taxes. Well, maybe we're celebrating just the fact that we've got our taxes finalized. Or we're finalizing our cropping plan, planning for crop insurance, or our excitement for winter to finally be on its way out the door, and that the days are actually getting longer. We're also celebrating National Ag Day, recognizing women in agriculture, and for many families across the Midwest, it's also the start of spring work, calving season, equipment prep, and checking fences. Families start working closer together again. You're riding in a pickup together, you're checking cows together, or you're working late in the shop. And when families spend that much time together again, something interesting starts to happen. There's always a question that shows up, usually not out in the field or in the shop, but around the kitchen table. It's the question most farm families eventually think about, but they never come out and ask. And what is that question? It's, what happens to this farm someday? Now, after working with farm families for more than 22 years in estate planning, trust administration, and farm succession planning, I can tell you something. Almost every farm family thinks about this question, but many families avoid talking about it like the plague. Not because they don't care, but because succession planning touches on things that are so hard to talk about. There's a lot of emotion involved. There's control, money, fairness, and simply family relationships that get muddied. And sometimes even our own mortality. So today we're going to talk about what I call the kitchen table problem, why farm families avoid the succession conversation, and how to finally start it. Over the years, I've sat across that table from a lot of farm families. We've discussed many different crops, operations, and heck, been in many different states. But the reasons families avoid that succession conversation all too often are very similar. There are usually 5 big reasons, and I'm going to walk through those. So the first reason is fear of conflict. Parents don't want to start this conversation that might cause tension between their children. They worry about jealousy. They worry about hurt feelings. They worry about if one child wants to come back to farm and another doesn't. Things might get uncomfortable. And so instead of risking conflict, they just flat out avoid it. They don't say anything. But what I've learned over the years is avoiding that conversation doesn't eliminate it. It only postpones it. And sometimes it even makes it worse. Reason number 2, the founder isn't ready. Another common reason is simply this. The founder isn't ready to talk about it, or they don't even want to even think about it. For many farmers and ranchers, the farm isn't just their job, it's their identity, it's their purpose, and it's what they've spent their entire life building. So when someone says succession planning, what they sometimes hear is, you should retire. But that's not really what the conversation is about. Succession planning isn't just about walking away. It's about creating a plan for the future. And don't say, they'll just figure it out someday. You'll have family problems and lose any family unity you once had during your life. Reason number 3, no clear successor. Sometimes families avoid that conversation because they simply don't know what the answer is. Maybe one child is helping on the farm. Maybe 2 are interested. Maybe none of the kids have expressed interest yet. And parents worry that bringing up the topic might create expectations. So they wait, and they wait, and they wait. But clarification rarely ever appears by accident. The only way to have clarification is just rip that Band-Aid off and have the conversation. Reason number 4, everyone assumes something different. This one happens more often than you might think. Parents think the kids already know the plan, or I should say, they assume the kids already know. How many farm families have had these conversations? Growing up, nobody talked about it because if we do, then that means I have to talk about my own mortality and retirement. That's not a discussion I want to have, at least not even with my family, because we don't talk about our emotions and control and finances. Kids assume their parents have something written down somewheres. When this happens, everyone operates with different expectations, which can lead to big surprises later. Reason number 5, not even knowing where to start. Where do we begin? Finally, many families avoid the conversation because succession planning feels so complicated. It feels so heavy. I don't even know where to begin. What do we even start with? And I don't want to talk to an attorney. They're expensive and they're intimidating. I don't know anything about taxes. I can't tell you how many farmers and ranchers that I've talked to who use TurboTax. Well, there's nothing wrong with using TurboTax, but are they getting the best bang for their buck? Who do they go to for tax advice? Who can they go to for any sort of advice and knows what their whole operational plan looks like and talk through those what-if scenarios? Should we put our farm in a trust or an LLC? What is the difference between those two? Should we have a buy-sell agreement? Oh man, it can feel so overwhelming. So families think the first step must be a complicated plan. It's not. The first step doesn't have anything to do with talking to an attorney or an accountant. But here's a secret. The first step is simply just talking. Now, let me share a story that really illustrates this. Several years ago, I worked with a farm family that had 3 sons. One son had been farming with his dad for over 20 years, and the other 2 had careers in town. When we sat down together for the first meeting, this is what happened. The farming son spoke first, and he said something that really struck a chord with me. He said, I don't even know if Dad wants me here long term. I've just been here working and going through the motions and helping put the crop in, but I don't know. Dad has never said anything that he wants me here long term. His dad turned and looked at him completely shocked. I'm like, what do you mean? Of course I want you here. And the son said, yes, but you've never said anything. We've never talked about what the future of the farm is going to look like. So they had been working side by side for 20 years, planting crops together, fixing equipment in the shop, making other cropping decisions together. So they talked about the cropping decisions, but they've never actually sat down and talked about the future and who was going to be doing what and how long Dad was going to be farming. When the son thought he would work for him and his finances to get into the farm. The son never really even knew where he stood. So Dad had a lot of assumptions. And Mom, well, she didn't like to hear any of this conflict or the difficult conversations. So she just kept getting up from the table to turn the thermostat down. By then, there wasn't a problem sitting at the kitchen table. It was more of a full-blown fire at the kitchen table that needed to be put out. Everyone was thinking about the future, but nobody wanted to say it. So if you're listening today and thinking, hey, this sounds a lot like our family, but we don't even know where to start, you're not alone. One of the things I do through Pathfinder Legacy is help farm families simply start the conversation, not with complicated legal documents right away, but with guided discussions that help families clarify what they want for the future of their farm, who wants to be involved, and what steps need to be taken next. Because once families start talking about these things, the rest of the plan becomes much easier. All right, now let's jump back into some of my stories. What happens when families don't talk? When the conversation doesn't happen, expectations begin forming. Sometimes the farming child assumes they'll take over someday. Sometimes the non-farming children assume everything will be divided equally. That's right. Fair isn't equal, or is it? Sometimes parents believe there's still plenty of time, but life doesn't always follow our timeline. Sometimes you get thrown curveballs. And over the years, I've seen situations where health issues have changed everything, or a parent has passed away unexpectedly, or siblings have discovered that there was no plan written at all. One situation that really struck with me involved a farm where the son had been farming with his parents for many years. Everyone thought he would continue the operation, but there was no formal discussion. When the parents unexpectedly passed away in a car accident, the land passed equally to all 4 children. Suddenly, the farming son was faced with buying out his own siblings, or losing access to the land he had been farming his entire life. Not because anyone intended for that to happen. And as parents, if you think your kids will all get along and figure it out, that's a bad assumption to make. Because now you have spouses and significant others in the picture who have a huge influence. And guess what? Money talks. Now, here's the good news. Starting the conversation is much simpler than people think. You don't need that lawyer in the room at this point, and you don't need a final plan. You don't even need answers yet. You just need a starting point. And here are 3 questions I'm going to give you that work really well to starting that conversation. Here's the first one. What do we want the farm to look like in 10 years? Not next year. Let's just talk in 10 years, generality. This question helps your families and your operations start looking and thinking about the long-term future. Question number 2. Who wants to be involved in the future of the farm? This allows everyone to express their interests honestly. Some may want to farm, some may want ownership, and some may simply want to stay connected so they have a place to come back to for the holidays. Question number 3. What needs to happen first to move towards that future? Sometimes it's a business structure. Is it a trust, or is it an LLC or some other type of entity? Sometimes it's just communicating what you're wanting with all players of the family. Sometimes it's training the next generation and start giving more responsibilities and job duties. But these questions are so needed to start the process. Let me share one more story. I worked with a ranch family a few years ago where the parents decided to host a family meeting. There were I'm not picking on attorneys today, but there were no attorneys involved at this point. No Excel spreadsheets, so no accountants with no financials laid out. Mom simply just had coffee and cookies, and they were sitting around the kitchen table. And Dad started out by asking, "We realize we've never actually asked you kids what you want." Whoa. That was a huge question to open the door. Then each of their kids shared their own perspective. Some wanted to be involved in the ranching operation, while others were happy with their careers elsewhere. Within a few months, they had built a plan. Everyone knew who was doing what and how the farming operation was going to transition and continue their family legacy. And most importantly, the family was all on the same page with a shared vision for the future. This would have never have happened if Dad didn't start that conversation and ask what you kids want. So if you're listening today while you're out working cattle or driving tractor or sitting at the kitchen table with your coffee cup in hand, take a moment to think about the conversations happening in your own family. Not legal conversations, just the truthful ones. Because at the end of the day, the hardest part of succession planning isn't the paperwork. It's simply just starting that conversation. And once the conversation begins, the future of the farm becomes a whole lot clearer, because silence is the most expensive succession plan a farm family can have. Thanks for joining me today on the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast. If this episode made you think about your own farm's future, consider sharing it with a family member. Sometimes the best way to start the conversation is simply by listening together. I encourage you to share it with someone in your family, and if you want more tools and resources on farm succession planning, you can find them at pathfinderlegacy.com. Until next time, we'll see you between the ditches.
Thanks for listening to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast, where your future is our focus. Be sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and visit us at pathfinderlegacy.com to start building your transition plan today.